I helped my parents when they were going through a difficult period, and when I returned home, I found out that they had drowned my dog, whom I loved with all my heart. Now they want me to forgive them. I gave everything I could to help them, and when I came home, they had drowned the only soul who ever loved me unconditionally. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. I've lurked on Reddit for years, mostly for relationship drama and late-night doom scrolling, but now I feel like I'm inside one of those stories, and I have no idea what to do with the anger sitting in my chest. I am 25 years old, the kind of guy who was always labeled the responsible one, the quiet sibling, the fixer. When things go wrong in the family, I'm the one they call. Not because they respect me, but because they expect me to show up. And I always did. 6 months ago, my parents were going through hell. My dad lost his job unexpectedly after 20 years. Mom spiraled into depression, stopped getting out of bed. Bills piled up. The house, once annoyingly pristine, started smelling like sadness and spoiled takeout. I didn't even hesitate. I left the apartment I was renting with 2 friends in another city, took unpaid leave from work, and moved back home. I maxed out a credit card buying groceries, covered their utility bills, and spent every night trying to cook something comforting enough to get my mom to eat more than 3 bites. I sat with my dad through nights of shame and bitterness as he cried into his whiskey. It was exhausting, but I told myself this is what family does. The only thing keeping me sane through it all was Bear. Bear was my dog. A fluffy, anxious golden retriever mix with soft brown eyes, and this weird crooked tail that never wagged straight. I rescued him 4 years ago from a kill shelter right after college. He was scared of everything. Stairs, aluminum foil, the sound of microwaves, but he trusted me. Slowly, he bloomed into the goofball he was always meant to be. He slept curled up next to me every night, tucked his nose under my arm, and licked away my tears more times than I could count. When I brought Bear home, my parents didn't love the idea. They said he was a messy distraction, and that I needed to get serious about life. But I wasn't asking for their approval. I'd already been living on my own by then. When I moved back to help them, I made it clear Bear was part of the deal. He stayed in my room, never went near the kitchen, and was walked twice a day. I even installed a baby gate so he wouldn't bother them. Things were tense but manageable. My dad barely acknowledged Bear's existence. My mom would flinch if his fur brushed her leg. Bear, being Bear, still tried to win them over, tail wagging, tongue hanging out, offering a toy or nuzzling against a shin. They always pulled away. Eventually, he stopped trying. Just stayed near me, loyal as ever. For 2 months, I juggled everything. Making sure the mortgage was paid, job hunting with my dad, cooking meals, and keeping Bear quiet so he wouldn't bother them. I was burned out. But Bear would rest his head on my lap every night, as if reminding me, you're not alone. Then one day, my aunt, Mom's sister, slipped and fell down a flight of stairs, broke her hip. She lived alone in a small town 4 hours away. No one else could go. So, of course, I packed my things, filled Bear's food containers, and asked my parents, just for a week, to watch him while I helped my aunt recover and set up some care. I made them a schedule. I wrote everything down. I even left extra treats. Mom hesitated. Dad groaned. But in the end, they said yes. Only a week, my mom said. And don't expect us to be cuddling that mutt. I left feeling uneasy, but I had no other choice. Bear wagged his tail at me when I kissed his nose goodbye. I promised him I'd be back soon. I had no idea that would be the last time I'd see him alive. I got back home on a Sunday evening. It was raining, the kind of gray, endless drizzle that makes everything feel heavier. I remember pulling into the driveway, squinting through the windshield wipers, and thinking, God, I can't wait to see Bear. I'd even stopped at his favorite treat place, the little corner shop with peanut butter bones shaped like dinosaurs. I was tired. My aunt was doing better, but the whole week had been physically and emotionally draining. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night, between cleaning, calling her doctors, and organizing a home nurse rotation. But I kept telling myself, just get home. Bear will be there. He'll jump on you like always and everything will feel right again. Only, it didn't. When I opened the front door, the house was quiet. Not the resting dog in another room kinda quiet. No soft panting. No clicking of paws on the hardwood. No tail thumps against the wall. Bear! I called out, voice already faltering. I dropped my duffel and stepped out of my shoes. Buddy? I'm home. Nothing. Not even the jingle of his collar. A cold wave crawled up my spine. Maybe he was sleeping. Maybe they'd locked him in my room by mistake. I rushed down the hallway, flung open my bedroom door. It was neat. Too neat. His bed was gone. The water bowl was gone. Even the damn bag of food I'd left tucked beside the dresser had disappeared. Like no dog had ever lived there at all. I opened the closet, checked the bathroom, went out into the backyard in the rain, calling for him. Louder now. My voice cracked by the third, Bear. That's when I heard the clink of utensils in the kitchen. My parents were sitting at the table, casually eating spaghetti like everything was normal. The air smelled of tomato sauce and something bitter underneath. I stood there, dripping wet from the rain. Where's Bear? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. They didn't answer immediately. My mom's eyes flicked toward my dad, who kept twirling his fork. I'm talking to you, I said, stepping forward. My chest was pounding. He's not here, my dad finally muttered, not looking up. I blinked. Yeah, obviously. So where is he? That's when my mom, without looking at me, said, we had to get rid of him. Took me a full 5 seconds to understand what I just heard. Get rid of him? I repeated, the words burning as they came out. What the hell does that mean? My dad sighed. It was too much. He wouldn't stop whining at the door. He chewed the baseboard in the laundry room. We couldn't sleep. He was probably terrified. I yelled. He's anxious when I'm gone. I told you that. My mom crossed her arms. Well, you're the one who left him here. You know how we feel about animals. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. My voice dropped into a whisper. Did you give him to someone? A shelter? She looked away. We handled it, she said. Her voice was cold. Flat. What the fuck does that mean, Mom? My dad finally looked at me. His face was blank. He wouldn't stop barking one night. It was late and your mom was having one of her episodes. I snapped. I filled the tub. Held him down. Everything in me shattered. No, you're lying. You're fucking lying to me. My mom stood up, arms trembling. You don't understand what we've been going through. You have no idea what it's like in this house. I left my life for you. I screamed. I gave up my job, my apartment, my friends, so I could come back and help you crawl out of this hellhole. And you. I couldn't finish. Couldn't breathe. My knees buckled and I leaned on the counter, bile rising in my throat. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might stop. I don't remember much after that. I know I walked out into the rain, still hearing them in the background. My dad trying to justify it, my mom crying now, saying they didn't mean for it to go that far. But all I could see was Bear's face. The way he used to look at me, like I was his whole world. And I wasn't there. I didn't cry the first night. I sat on the curb outside our house for hours, soaked to the bone, my breath clouding in the air, replaying their words over and over in my head. We handled it. Held him down. You don't understand what we've been through. I think my mind just shut off. Like my brain couldn't process the level of evil it had just been introduced to. Not from strangers, not from villains in some news story, but from the two people who raised me. I ended up driving to a gas station and sitting in the parking lot until morning. I bought a coffee I didn't drink. My hands were shaking too much to hold it. I kept seeing Bear's face. Not the way they left him. Not the bathtub. Just the way he'd look at me when I walked in the door. That little tail wiggle. That slow walk over when he was still waking up from a nap. The way he'd press his forehead against mine like he was saying you're safe. I wasn't safe anymore. And he wasn't here. The next morning, I went back to the house. I know, why the hell would I go back there? I can't even answer that. Part of me needed proof. Part of me hoped it was some deranged lie. Or that maybe he'd gotten out and they were covering their asses. I didn't want to believe it was real. I walked in. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. My parents were upstairs. I heard movement. I didn't care. I wasn't there to talk. The laundry room was small, cluttered with detergent bottles and unused gym equipment. But my eyes went straight to that drawer. The one I'd seen cracked open when I stormed out the night before. I walked over. My hand hovered for a second. Then I pulled it open. Inside were soggy towels. A Ziploc bag with Bear's collar, still damp. His name tag, the little bone-shaped silver tag I'd had engraved when I got him. It said Bear on one side, and my number on the back. Underneath that was a receipt, dated 2 days before I came back. It was from a hardware store. They'd bought rubber gloves, bleach, and drain cleaner. I gagged. There was more. A handwritten note, probably from my dad. It was smeared and water-damaged, but I could still make out most of it. Couldn't sleep. Dog barking all night again. She couldn't take it. Said it had to stop. I told her I'd handle it. Didn't think I'd actually. I thought maybe if I scared him. But once he was in the water, it was too late. She was crying. I had to do something. Couldn't just bury him. Wrapped him up, used the contractor bag. Dropped him at the river by 4 a.m. No one saw. I think it's done now. I dropped the paper like it was on fire. Every fiber of me screamed to vomit. To scream. To destroy something. But I just sat down on the cold tile and cried for the first time since I came home. I confronted them again. This time they were sitting in the living room. They looked surprised to see me, like they thought I'd just disappear and take the pain with me. I didn't scream this time. My voice was steady, quiet, terrifyingly calm. Honestly, I found the note, I said. They said nothing. You drowned my dog and dumped his body in a fucking river. And you want me to forgive you? My dad looked at his hands. We made a mistake. No, I said. A mistake is forgetting to feed him. A mistake is letting him out and having him run off. This. I held up the note, my hands shaking. This is murder. My mom stood. Her eyes were red. We were in a bad place. I wasn't sleeping. I was hearing voices. You don't know what it was like. I didn't ask for you to come help us. You just showed up and dumped your problems on top of ours. That broke something in me. My problems? Bear was the only good thing I had. The only living thing in this house that ever gave a shit about me. She flinched. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. You could have called me, I said, voice cracking. You could have told me you couldn't handle it. I would have found someone. A friend. A damn shelter. Anything. They didn't respond. You killed him, and now you want forgiveness like it's a transaction. Like I owe it to you. My dad looked up. We're still your parents. No, I said, stepping back. You're just the people who raised me. That's not the same thing. That night, I packed everything I owned into my car. My clothes, a few books, my laptop, Bear's leash, even though I knew I'd never use it again. I held that damn leash for 10 minutes straight, just sitting on the floor of my old bedroom, choking on the memories it dragged behind it. It still smelled like him, like sun-warmed fur and grass. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I didn't owe them a goodbye. Before I left, I taped Bear's collar to the fridge with a note underneath. This is the last thing in this house that ever meant something real. You took him from me. Don't expect anything else. Then I walked out and never looked back. I crashed at a friend's place that night, barely speaking. I just said, "Hey man, is your couch still open?" And he pulled me into a hug before I could finish the sentence. I slept maybe an hour. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bear's face. Not scared, not in pain, just looking at me, waiting for me to save him. And I didn't. The guilt ate me alive. I know it wasn't my fault, logically, I know that. But logic doesn't comfort you at 3 a.m. when the silence feels like someone pressed pause on your soul. Over the next week, the calls started. First, it was my mom. "Please call us back. We didn't realize how attached you were. We didn't think." Then my dad. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not like we wanted to do it. Things were bad. You know how she gets." I did what I had to do. Like he expected me to say thank you for cleaning up their mess. I didn't answer a single one. They tried everything. Guilt. Apologies. excuses, then anger. We're still your parents, damn it. Don't turn your back on us now. Too late. They turned their backs on me the moment they held Bear underwater like he was a chore to be erased. A month passed. I found a sublet through a friend of a friend. Tiny studio. Barely enough room to walk between the bed and the kitchen, but it let me breathe. I bought a frame for Bear's collar and hung it by the door. Every time I left, I touched it with 2 fingers like a ritual. I'm still here, buddy. The grief didn't come all at once. It leaked through everything. Random stuff would wreck me. An old toy I found in my hoodie pocket, the word "good boy" in a movie. I couldn't go near a dog park without losing it. I felt like I'd lost more than Bear. I'd lost the idea that family meant anything, that there was some unspoken promise, some invisible thread, that blood wouldn't betray you like that. Turns out it can. It did. 2 months in, I got a letter. Not an email. A real paper letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My mom. It was 4 pages long. She wrote about her breakdown, how she'd been seeing things, hearing things, feeling like the walls were breathing. She said Bear's barking was like knives in her skull, and she begged me to understand how desperate she was, how sorry she is. I wasn't myself, she wrote. I know it doesn't bring him back, but I need you to believe me. I didn't hate Bear. I just couldn't take it anymore. She said my dad did it to protect her, that she never told him to go that far, that he did it anyway. There were tear stains on the last page. But what broke me was the line at the bottom. If there's any piece of you that still believes we're worth saving, please let us try. I read it 5 times. Then I crumpled it up and threw it across the room. I didn't throw it away though. It sat in the corner, a wrinkled mess of guilt and memory, staring at me like a wounded animal. It was a Saturday morning when they came. I just made coffee and was sitting on the floor, eating cereal out of the box like some sad bachelor cliché. The blinds were still drawn. My phone was off. I'd started keeping it off on weekends just to give my brain a break from notifications, guilt trips, and those late-night texts from my dad that always started with, "I know you don't want to hear this." But then came the knock. 3 soft taps. I thought it was my neighbor at first, the guy upstairs who always forgets his keys. I pulled open the door, still chewing on a mouthful of Lucky Charms, and I froze. It was them, my parents, standing side by side, like mannequins in clothes I hadn't seen before. They looked older, smaller, like grief had weathered them down. My mom held something in her hands. First, I thought it was a box. Then I saw the corner of it. A worn, folded blanket. No, a quilt. The kind she used to make when I was a kid, back when she still had enough light in her to create something warm. And stitched into the border in looping thread, dogs. Specifically, Bear. Over and over again. Running. Sitting. Curled up with his crooked little tail. I didn't say anything. My mouth had gone completely dry. My dad cleared his throat. "We thought you might want this. She's been working on it for a while." My mom stepped forward and gently placed the quilt at my feet, like it was an offering to a god they didn't believe in. "I didn't come to explain," she said quietly. "I know what we did, and I won't defend it. I won't excuse it." She looked up, and for the first time her eyes didn't dodge mine. I miss you." My dad nodded. "And we'll leave. Right after this. We just needed you to know we're trying. I've been going to therapy. Real therapy. Not that half-assed couples counselor from back in the day." I still hadn't moved. I could feel my heart trying to hammer its way out of my ribs. Every instinct in me was screaming to slam the door, to throw the quilt back and scream, "You don't get to do this." But I didn't. I stepped back, slowly, wordlessly. They didn't follow me in, just stood in the doorway, waiting. Finally, I said, "Why now?" My dad answered, "Because we didn't know what it meant. Not just to lose Bear, but to lose you. You cut us off and we figured you'd come back. Like always." He glanced down. "You didn't." They stayed for 7 minutes. We didn't sit. We didn't hug. They didn't ask to come in. When they turned to leave, my mom hesitated and whispered, "I think about him every night." I closed the door before she could say more. I stood there for what felt like an hour, staring at the quilt in my hands. It was beautiful, intricate. I could tell she'd sewn it by hand. She'd stitched every memory into it. The way Bear used to lie down with his legs out like a frog. The way one ear always flopped to the side. The toy duck he used to carry from room to room. Each stitch was a confession. But I didn't know if that meant anything. That night, I sat with the quilt in my lap, tracing the threads. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. And in that silence, something broke. Not forgiveness. Not even understanding. But the start of something else. A question. Can someone come back from something like this? Can I? The letter came on a Wednesday. Just an ordinary, gray-ass Wednesday. The kind where the sky looks like wet concrete and your soul kind of matches. I'd gotten home from work late, tossed my bag on the couch, and there it was. A plain white envelope wedged in the doorframe. No return address. Just my name. Full name. First, middle, last. In handwriting I didn't recognize. I almost threw it away, thinking it was another passive-aggressive guilt bomb from my dad. But something about the weight of it felt different. I opened it. There were 3 pages, handwritten in a looping, careful script. Not neat like my mom's. Not aggressive like my dad's. It was almost gentle. The first line stopped me cold. You don't know me, but I was there that night. I sat down on the floor. Her name was Marcy. She said she was my parents' neighbor. 2 houses down, behind the fence, the one with the huge azaleas. She'd lived there for 15 years. Seen me walk Bear every morning. Knew the rhythm of our life better than we thought. And that night, she'd been out late watering her garden. Insomnia, she wrote. Sometimes she'd just putter around the yard at 2 a.m. like a ghost. She heard something. First barking. Frantic. Sharp. Terrified. Then yelling. Then silence. Then a splash. I didn't know what to do, she wrote. It didn't make sense. I told myself maybe they were bathing him. Maybe he got into something gross. But it didn't sound right. The tone. The fear. The way the barking just stopped. And then the next night she saw my dad. Hauling something out to the truck. Big black contractor bag. Tossed it in the back like it was trash. She followed him. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wasn't sure it was my place. But I saw your post online. Your cousin shared it on Facebook. And I realized this whole time I'd been carrying a piece of the truth you didn't have. She ended with a phone number and a line that shook me. I saw Bear almost every morning. He always looked back at your door, like he was waiting for you to come too. I didn't cry. I sat there with the letter in my lap, this weird heat rising in my chest, like grief had finally hit critical mass and was turning into something else. And I realized something brutal. They didn't just kill him. They lied about how. My mom had said she was spiraling, that she couldn't take it, that my dad acted alone. But now I knew she'd been there. She heard the barking, the splash. She said nothing, did nothing. It was a shared silence, a double betrayal. And now they were sending quilts and letters and showing up at my door like remorse could be sewn into fabric. I called them the next day. My mom picked up on the second ring. Her voice caught when she said, "Hello. I got a letter." I said, "Pause. From who?" "From someone who saw what you did. That you were both there." Silence. Then, "It's not what you think. You were standing right there, Mom. You heard him. And you let it happen. You told me he barked too much. That he was a problem to solve." She sniffled. "I wasn't in my right mind. I said that." "Eve." "No," I said sharply. "You've excused it. You've wrapped it in trauma and sadness and let my dad take the fall. You think a blanket full of dogs makes this right?" She sobbed. I didn't care. "Here's what I want," I said, my voice shaking. "I want you to stop pretending this was some tragic accident. I want you to admit you both chose to end his life because he was inconvenient." "You're right," she said finally, through broken breaths. "You're absolutely right. I know." And then I said something I didn't even know was coming out of me until it was already out. "I want you to feel what I felt. I want it to burn." They called again later that week. Multiple times. My dad even left a voicemail saying he was ready to talk about the real truth. But I didn't call back. I wasn't ready for another performance. Not yet. I needed time, space. So I did the only thing I could think of. I drove to the river, the one from the letter. I walked along the muddy banks until I found a small clearing. And there, under a tall cedar, I laid down Bear's favorite ball. And I whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't there." The wind moved like breath through the branches. Everything around me felt still, like the world was watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. I stood up. I should have walked back to the car. That was the plan. Leave the ball. Whisper my goodbye. Go. But something pulled me forward, like an invisible string tugging at my ribs. Down the muddy slope, toward the river. Each step sank just a little deeper than the last. And then, I saw it. Across the water, half submerged between broken reeds and driftwood. A black trash bag. Bloated. Split at one end. Caught on a fallen log like it had tried to escape downstream but got stuck. I froze. The air left my lungs. The world turned cold and bright and sharp at the edges, like glass underfoot, because I knew, even before I saw it, even before the sickening detail came into focus. The edge of matted fur poking through the torn plastic, soaked and tangled, the unmistakable glint of metal from a collar that looked so much like his. I knew. Bear. My bear. Tossed like garbage. I wanted to run. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to scream until the trees shook and the earth cracked and someone answered for this. But I didn't move. And that's when it happened. The sound. It wasn't real. Couldn't be real. But I swear on everything I have left. From the trees behind me or the wind, or maybe the broken spaces inside me. I heard it. That low, broken moo. Like the softest cry. Not a bark. Not a whimper. Just pain. A soul echo. A memory of Bear's final moment. The moment he looked for me and I wasn't there. My knees hit the ground hard. I didn't feel it. I crawled down until the water lapped at my jeans. Just 10 feet from the bag. I couldn't bring myself.